Hi everyone, my name is Brett Akker. Thank you for having me and thank you for turning out tonight. I have to say I got an email from a young lady this afternoon saying that she wanted to see me tonight and she couldn't get in, and I thought she was totally lying, and I'm absolutely amazed to see so many of you, so thank you. I'll try not to bore you too much. What I was going to do is I'm going to try and keep it quite short, and I will sort of briefly tell the story of Streetcar, how it started, where it got to, and Lovespace as well. And then sort of open the floor to you guys. So as many questions as you want, I guess up until 8 o'clock, then please do fire away. I'm keeping it very informal, so if there are questions that pop up during it, by all means shout out. I'm absolutely fine with questions throughout. I guess starting at the beginning, and sort of Streetcar in particular, sort of finding the business idea. Streetcar was originally, I guess, the very beginnings of Streetcar was a university. So as you can see from the receding hairline, that was quite some time ago. And it was a conversation between myself and a guy I lived with. So this is back in 95, I guess, something like that, 95, 96. And we said that we were going to start a business one day. Didn't know what it was going to be, but one day we were going to start a business. We probably had a bit to drink. This is probably quite late at night after a few drinks, so we didn't think too much of it for a couple of years. We then went and did our own separate things. I went and worked for Mars, and he went and worked at P&O Nedlloyd in South Africa for a while. And again, had another conversation sort of 4 or 5 years later saying, right, when he's back in the UK, we will do something. Don't know what it's going to be again, but we'll do something. So Andy, the guy I founded it with, came back and we said, right, well, let's start thinking of what it is that we might be able to do. So we went through a pretty structured process where we would meet after work 3 evenings in the week and every weekend day for a period of about 3-4 months, where we just discussed business ideas, trends in the market, came up with quite a few ideas that thankfully we didn't go with, because there's no way I'd be here today, or if I was, I'd be having a very different story, that's for sure. And we just happened upon an article about car sharing whilst we were having these chats. It was operating in Europe and North America, and we just thought, wow, London should be, one of the very best markets for this worldwide. And that's sort of where, I guess, the seed was planted. We then went through the process that everyone starting a business goes through, where sort of discussing the business plan, thinking about pricing, thinking about what it might look like. We ran focus groups, etc., etc. For probably a period, again, whilst we were doing our corporate jobs, of sort of 6 months or so. Come end of 2003, we sort of had our go, no-go decision at that point. Resigned from our jobs, did 3 months worth of full-time work on Streetcar before we launched in 2004, April time. Does anyone know what Streetcar actually is? I should probably have started. People do, okay, that's good, thank you. One person does. So Streetcar, I guess we sort of saw it sitting in between car rental and car ownership. We had cars dotted around London where people joined up, they became a member, they got a smart card, and that would allow them access into the car. So they would go online or over the phone, book up, wander down to the nearest car, swipe their card, that would open the door. In they get, use it for half an hour to days at a time, weeks at a time. We had the odd time when people took it for slightly longer than they said they would, and months at a time, but we managed to get those cars back in the end. And then they would just lock it with their smart card at the end, and they would get billed for the time that they took the car at the end of the trip. In terms of disruption is a sort of buzzword at the moment. About every business seems to disrupt an industry, but I guess at the time Streetcar was truly disruptive in that, as I said earlier, it sort of sat between that car rental and car ownership space. Car rental, it was short-term versus car rental at the time, which was very much 24 hours. And also it was convenient. So we wanted to get to a position where we had cars near pretty much everyone in London. People would book, and then they would literally be able to go down any time of day or night, get in the car, and away they go. So that was the sort of key differences between us and car rental. Key differences between us and car ownership was we wanted to have the convenience of car ownership but without the cost. So with a lot of people that own cars in London, they had cars sitting outside their flats, outside their houses, depreciating and not being used for at least 5 days of the week. So that was, I guess, how we looked to try and disrupt the industry. In terms of the key challenges, I put these up here. Some of them are going to be, I guess, Streetcar specific, but some of them are, pretty relevant for every startup, I guess. First one, top left corner, is money. That is a key issue for most businesses as they start out. Now, we were in a very fortunate position with the business model that we had at Streetcar, in that we didn't need huge amounts of money to launch the service and huge amounts of money to actually grow it in those first few years. So the way that we operated was every car we bought in was on a lease purchase agreement. So what that meant was that after a period of 3 years, we owned that car outright. Now, when we first started looking at this, we didn't know this was going to happen. So this is going to sound very clever, but we were very ignorant at the time, and we sort of happened upon it more than anything else. But because you own the car at the end of the day, it meant that when you got the car in, you could reclaim the full amount of the VAT on the value of the car on day one. So what it meant was that we'd bring a car into the fleet, we'd have to pay a small deposit on that car in that first month, we'd get a small discount from the manufacturer, and then at the time we could reclaim 17.5% of the full value of that car. So we were in this bizarre situation where whenever we were running out of cash, we would bring another car into the business. But it allowed us to grow without getting too much money. So we launched the business on £60,000, and that was enough for the first 6-7 months, including paying ourselves hand-to-mouth salaries. We had our first angel investment after about 9 months, and that was purely just to grow the team from, well, at the time, 3 of us. We brought in another 4 people with that money. And then we did one sort of big round with Smedvig Capital after 3 years of the business, and that was getting about 3.5 million into the business. So in today's terms, not actually that much money, but it was purely because of this model that we had and how lucky we were with getting that sort of VAT rebate in early for every car that we bought in. The other thing in the middle that was very important for us were cars. Now, we did all of our wonderful pre-work before we launched. We had the business model sorted, we had the website sorted, we had everything sorted. And we left cars until the last minute thinking that was going to be the easy thing. It wasn't the easy thing at all. We ended up speaking to about 60 or 70 different funders before we got the financing for those first cars. Everyone said to us, guys, I really like the sound of it. It sounds like a really good idea. Come back to us in 6 months' time when you've proved the concept, and then we'll give you some cars. And our argument of being very, very difficult to prove the concept without any cars didn't really go down particularly well. But eventually we found someone who were going to fund our first 8 cars. So we launched the business with those 8 cars and grew from that. Parking spaces was another major sort of hurdle for us, I guess. When we launched the business, we launched spaces wherever we could. So that was people's driveways, that was car parks, literally wherever we could find cars. And in the early days, that meant going and knocking on people's doors if they had a space for a car outside their house. And I can't tell you the number of weird looks I got at 9 p.m. at night when I was knocking on someone's door asking if they would rent out their little driveway for us, for a concept that no one knew what it was. I think they thought I was absolutely mad, but that is how we got our spaces for those first 8 cars. As you can see on the photo on the right, that's an on-street space, so that's the space with a local authority. And I've just spotted someone who knows a lot about this. So don't ask too many questions, Alistair, at the end, because you know more than me about this whole thing. But with local authorities, that's where we eventually got most of our base. So by the time we sold the business, probably 70% of our spaces were with local authorities, but that took a long, long time to come. So when we launched the business, we said, right, let's grow this thing in off-street spaces. Let's not be held back by the length of time it might take to get these on-street spaces, but eventually they started coming through. And they, as I say, at the end, 70% of our spaces were through that. And that's, to be honest with you, a lot of, I guess, what Zipcar bought at the end was those sort of network of spaces that we got, particularly in London. Marketing was another challenge, and it's a challenge that faced us, big challenge for every business. Again, we were quite lucky, I guess, with Streetcar in that we could market. When we first launched in 2004, we could market relatively cheaply and relatively effectively. In those days, social media was pretty much non-existent. I think Facebook had launched just before we had, pretty much. Even Google AdWords was in its infancy at that stage. But we just had a way of marketing whereby we handed out these blue car-shaped flyers at tube stations and at train stations. Very, very low cost. We would do our sort of day jobs in the first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening. We would go and hand out these flyers at train stations. Anyone that we knew that came through were roped into joining us, and they would hand out flyers with us as well. Several people that I see quite a few people that I hadn't seen for a number of years as they came out of the train station, and they clocked me, And I could see, just like I was going through their hair, they just saw me handing out flyers at a tube station. They thought, knew you were going to go far, knew this is where you were going to end up, was handing out these flyers. But it was hugely effective because we knew that 90% of people there were our target market. So they either had a car sitting at home whilst they got the tube to and from work, sitting there doing nothing, or they didn't own a car. So we knew it was hugely targeted and it worked phenomenally well. And even today, Zipcar, with a much higher marketing budget than we had there, I think it was £4.50 for that first month, still use this as a major part of their marketing. So it still works even today. These apples are supposed to sort of show, I guess, differentiation. And it was something that we thought about pretty early on with Streetcar, in that, what differentiates us from what's out there. And when we launched, I think the product, the service differentiated itself because nothing like it existed. But we were fairly sure that, if we could think of this, certainly other people could think of it. And there was nothing stopping potentially car rental guys, car manufacturers coming and doing this at some stage. So we focused on customer service. And it's a pretty sort of, I guess, something ridiculous to go for, but we set out on day one to try and provide the best customer service that you possibly could, and the best customer service in the UK. Now, things have improved a lot, I think, in the last 10 years, but again, when we launched, customer service in this country was pretty poor generally. So it meant that if you provided good customer service, you stood out. And if you provided excellent customer service, you really stood out. And that's what we set out to achieve from day one, and it's something that we instilled into every single person that joined the business. Finally, people. That is another sort of key challenge and probably the most important challenge, and potentially the hardest challenge for all small businesses. Now, something that we always made sure that we did was try and hire people better than ourselves. For us, that wasn't difficult, but for some people that is. And I think for some founders in particular, they find that very difficult because they find it threatening. Without the team that we eventually built, we would never have got to where we'd got to. We were very clear. We had a few strengths. We had a lot of weaknesses. And we tried to hire people better than us in different areas of the business. And it was because of them that we managed to grow as much as we did. In terms of, I guess, the story and where it started, where we came from, where we went to, launched it in 2004, just the two of us, 2 members, and they were the same as the 2 people at the top, so that was me and Andy. 8 cars in 4 locations in a small area of London, around the Clapham area. We sold it 6 years later. By then we had about 250 employees, 1,500 cars, vast majority of those in London, although we had small operations in 6 other cities, and we had about 80,000 members at that time. So, we weren't a massive business by any stretch of the imagination, but it was still, going from where we started, it was still a fairly short period of time in those 6 years to sort of, I guess, achieve what we managed to achieve. So that was very briefly. That was the sort of the streetcar store part of the story. We sold the business to Zipcar in 2010. They came in. We'd had conversations with Zipcar sort of prior to that time. We'd had conversations with other people prior to that time as well. A question I get regularly is, how did you know when to sell the business? When did you know it was the right time? I don't have a good answer for that, and I've been asked it a lot, so I need to start thinking of one. But I guess what I would say is I knew when it wasn't right. So our first offer for the business came probably 3-4 months into it. We were tiny. We just launched our first few cars. We were just starting to think about our expansion plan and where the next cars were going to go. And a very, very big corporate, so one of the largest companies in the world, came to us and said, right guys, we're going to come and do this thing. So it's up to you. We can either buy you, not for very much money, but you might be able to pay off a bit of your mortgage. So we'll either come and buy you, or we'll come in and we'll crush you. Now, for 2 people who didn't know their arse from their elbow, quite frankly, it was quite a scary thing. But I guess we had enough confidence in the business model. We had enough confidence in that we were going to put absolutely everything into this thing to take these people on. And so we said, thanks very much, but crush away. We're gonna carry on doing what we're doing. They didn't actually launch in the end. They launched a similar business in another country, but they didn't come to the UK. Similarly, we had approaches from other businesses over the years, and it just wasn't the right timing. We hadn't grown to anywhere near where we wanted to be, and we hadn't achieved any of the things that we wanted to achieve. So I sort of know the answer as to why we didn't sell. Why we did sell, again, it was a bit of gut feel. It was 2010. The economy wasn't doing fantastically well at that moment in time. We didn't know what was around the corner. And the key thing with Zipcar is that it was going to allow us to expand into Europe much quicker than we were going to be able to do on our own. So that was the sort of reason why we sold the business. I remained with Zipcar full-time for about a year and a half, and then went to 3 days a week to sort of focus on the next thing, which is Lovespace. Has anyone heard of Lovespace? Okay, a few more people have had a Lovespace than Streetcar. That's good. That means we're doing a good job. So Lovespace it's a similar concept actually to Streetcar. I'm definitely not clever enough to come up with two totally different concepts. So it's a similar concept but different industry. So it's similar to Streetcar but in the self-storage arena. So key differences between what we do and what sort of the big self-storage operators do is that firstly we come to your door, so we pick up and drop off to your door. And the other key thing is that you can store one thing at a time if you want. So if you've just got one box of stuff that you want to store, you can do that with us. And you can pay £5.95 a month to store that with us versus 70, 80, 90 pounds for the smallest sort of storage unit you could get in a big yellow or a like. So again, in terms of the differences and the way it disrupts, similar to the way that Streetcar disrupted, number one, it's convenience, and two, on cost. So convenience is that we come to you, all you have to do is pack a box, that's it. And cost, again, unless you're going to store your whole house, we're vastly cheaper than any of the self-storage operators out there. And for businesses, which is the one at the bottom there, there's a lot of archive storage businesses out there. But again, very focused towards those large businesses. So when you're storing thousands of boxes, it makes sense. When you're storing 10, 50, even 100 boxes, it makes less sense from a financial point of view, and that's where we can be exceptionally competitive. So the idea behind Lovespace, don't worry too much about this. This is on here basically because my marketing team at Lovespace have told me that this is an open box. Okay, this is a box opened up, very clever, and therefore you have to put it in your presentation. So this is an open box, and don't worry too much about what the words say in there. But in terms of, I guess, why we launched Lovespace, how we launched Lovespace, Lovespace was launched by a conversation, or very incestuous, a conversation between myself and our first angel investor into Streetcar, whose background was self-storage. So he's basically the self-storage guru across Europe, Scandinavian guy called Carl August Meln. And Lovespace was born out of a conversation with us of putting Streetcar and self-storage together. The thing that is probably worth highlighting here, I think in terms of the demand side, it makes sense for us. Space is becoming more and more at a premium, both for businesses and for residents in big cities, not only in the UK but abroad. But the supply side issue is quite interesting. So if you speak to, or even hear the CEO of Big Yellow, for instance, speaking, their key issue is getting new units in places where they want to be. So they want to be in central London, for instance, but they're never going to be able to find more space in central London. It's just too expensive. And I guess that fits nicely into sort of what we're trying to do. So their ways to grow is expanding existing buildings, or it's putting up prices, both of which play into what we're trying to achieve with Lovespace. Because it doesn't matter for us where you live. We can provide the same service in Edinburgh as we can in central London, in that you can go online, book your stuff, within 24 hours you can get your boxes picked up, stored, and then when you want them back, you get them back within 24 hours as well. So again, we can provide actually better service than that in London, but that's the worst level that you'll get in the UK. Lovespace story so far, early days. We sort of launched properly, I guess, end of 2013. So we did a very small trial, middle of 12, made quite a few changes from that. Another small trial in middle of 13, made some changes there, and then launched properly with a redesigned website, redesigned logo, redesigned user experience at the end of 13. So we've sort of been going properly and spending a bit of marketing money for two and a bit years. And we've had over 80,000 boxes stored. 20,000 people have signed up to use the service. We've got national partnerships with some major UK brands out there. And this is something I guess we're particularly proud of. And I think, again, for early stage businesses where credibility is so important and trust is so important, to be able to have some of these partnerships and some of these brands working with us really, really helps us with that credibility. Because at the moment, without things like that, people go onto the website, book their collection, some chap comes picking up their family heirlooms and they're thinking, am I ever going to see this again? So having this these sort of partnerships with the likes of Mothercare, with the likes of Oxfam, really help with that trust and with that credibility. And I think if there's any way for any early stage business to have tie-ups, have partnerships with these major brands, it really helps in those early days. Fundraising, we've raised about £4 million to date. We've gone through various routes. So myself, Carl, and the sort of founding shareholders put in some money in the beginning. We've done a small angel round since then. We've done crowdfunding. That was an experience I've never gone through before, and that was very successful. So we looked to try and raise £600,000 and eventually closed around at 1.5 million. And so we didn't want any more than that. So that was very successful for us, and happy to take any questions on crowdfunding from anyone in the room. And we've just done another £1 million and potentially doing a top up on crowdfunding again in the next few weeks. The other thing that we managed to achieve is we've been sort of listed for several awards and won several awards. Again, some of these you take with a pinch of salt. You know, what do they really mean? Mean two things, I think. Firstly, it's great for the team. So to be able to win these awards is absolutely fantastic for our team to talk about, and for them to really feel part of something that's growing and is getting more and more successful. And the other thing is, it's useful when you fundraise as well. So certainly when you're speaking to VCs, when you're speaking to angels, they see these sorts of things, they hear about you, and you're far more likely to have sort of more fruitful conversations by winning some of these awards. Just before I wrap up, lessons learned. I apologise profusely about some of these pictures and what they stand for. So top left is supposed to be a model, and it's business model. So in terms of lessons learned, you've got to make sure that business model is right, and you've got to put the pre-work in before you actually launch. I mean, I always say that the easiest day that I had a Streetcar was the day we actually launched, rather than the 6 months beforehand, because it was just, that's where we had to put in 24/7 work to make sure we had the model right, to make sure we'd thought of every single question. And we used to meet every first member. We used to meet at the car, take them through how the service worked, and check their driving license, take their check at the time, this is how old it was, for their deposit, etc. So we used to meet every single one, and we got a lot of questions about how the service works, how does this work, how do you do this? And we'd pretty much, I think, sort of thought of everything. At that stage. So getting the model right and really thinking through the business is hugely important. I should say there was one chap that I took through his sort of induction into Streetcar, and I didn't have all the answers for him. So he was I need to be slightly careful. It's on camera, isn't it? Need to be quite careful what I say. So he wasn't the sharpest, and he wasn't the quickest. So I took him through how it works, opened the car for him with the card, and went through how it all worked, and then locked it at the end with the card. And he was really impressed, and he said, "Oh, okay, so I get it all. That's brilliant. Okay, I can't wait to use this." And with that, he got out his membership card, which is sort of, you know, like an Oyster card, and he was trying to get it into the key part of the door. So he was trying to unlock it in the tiny little keyhole in the door. And anyway, that was the first, I think pretty much the only member that we turned down. I didn't want him behind the wheel of one of our first 8 cars, so he didn't get through that process, but everyone else pretty much got it. In terms of the top right, that's sort of differentiating the product. And you might need to differentiate a little bit more than this picture shows. But I don't think you need to go absolutely crazy. For us to differentiate ourselves through customer service isn't mind-blowing by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that we really believed in, and it is something that actually stood out from the Streetcar service. And you know, if anyone has used Streetcar or Zipcar today, you know, generally the feedback has always been very strong on that customer service side. So thinking of ways to differentiate yourself and be different is really important, and thinking of how you're going to differentiate yourself in the future. So if your product or service is differentiated on day one, think about other people that might come into the industry. Think about how you're going to differentiate yourselves 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, and whatever that might be. And it doesn't need to be huge. It could literally be something like customer service. Money, lessons learned. Always try and get money. Always try and raise money when you don't need money. If you try and raise money when you need it, you probably won't get it. And if you do get it, it's going to be at a horrid valuation. So always try and go out raising money when you don't need it. And we're in a position, both with our angel round that we did and our VC round that we did, of going in and saying, look, we don't need your money, but we would love it to be able to grow that much quicker. So we could prove that actually we could carry on doing exactly what we're doing now and be profitable-ish, you know, £4.50 profit in a year maybe, but we could be profitable. We were break even at that point, and this was purely to do with growth. And with that sort of story, it's not easy, but it's definitely easier to raise money. As soon as you go in and you're running out of cash in the next month or so, the sharks are circling. People, again, as I said earlier on, trying to hire people as good as or better than you is absolutely vital. You know, making sure that they have the same values, making sure they're going to fit into the business is, again, very, very important. One thing with Streetcar that we did was we would interview every single person that joined the business. And that was the same, obviously, on day one when we were the only 2 people in the business, but it was the same when we had 250 odd people in the end. We called it the human being test, but it was really just the last 5 minutes. They'd gone through the process, and the last 5 minutes they would meet either Andy or I, and we would just give them the once over. Would they fit into this business? Did they stand for what we wanted this business to stand for? And it was something that worked really well for us, because we managed to create a fantastic team, and we managed to create a fantastic atmosphere in the office. And I think anyone that worked there or even works at Zipcar today will talk very fondly about working there. And that's purely because not so much what we did with the business and what we did once they joined, it was getting the right people in and the right caliber of people in with the right temperament and the right personality. Exit, lesson learned, don't exit too early. And also, I guess, this is probably slightly controversial, don't necessarily plan for exit. There's a lot of people I speak to now, and they'll come to me with their business plans, and they'll come to me with what they want to try and achieve with their business. And it's all about how they're going to exit in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years' time. And I think it's really dangerous to do that, because I think then you're not necessarily always taking the right decisions for the long term of the business. What we set out to achieve was trying to achieve a growing, profitable, or on the route to profitability business. And that's what we tried to achieve. We knew that if we succeeded, there would be potential people that might look to buy us, we could potentially float. There were potential exit opportunities, but that's not what we were working towards. We were working towards building a great business. And if you do that and you think long term and you think, you know, about that business and what it is that you want to build, then something will probably happen. If you build a great business, people will want to buy it. But if you make those decisions early on where all you're focused on is the next 3 years and achieving X, Y, Z to sell the business, you take short-term decisions and they're not necessarily the best for the business in the long term. So I would always say, don't plan for exit. Plan to build a fantastic business and something will happen. Just in terms of, I guess, my life today, so I chair Lovespace now. We've brought in a far better person, again, talking about bringing in people better than yourself. Brought in Steve Falwell, who's the managing director of Lovespace. He does the day-to-day. So I chair Lovespace, and I work as a non-exec director and advisor for various other startups. These are a few of the ones that I sort of work as an advisor or director, and there's been a few more since this. So I guess right now I get the best of both worlds. I get to work with a lot of different early stage businesses. I get to give my 2 pennies worth on strategy or whatever it may be, but I don't necessarily have to deal with HR issues or anything like that. So at the moment I'm a very, very lucky man. And these are some of the things that I'm invested in, and hopefully there's a couple of names here that some of you have come across, but they're all relatively early stage. I didn't start getting involved in other businesses since 2013, so only sort of 3 years or so, but these are some of the ones that I'm involved in. Finally, again, sorry, this is the marketing team. I have to say it every single presentation I give. Student brand ambassadors or brand ambassadors generally. There's internships at Streetcar at Lovespace. So by all means, if anyone's interested in a job or in an internship, whatever it might be, then please do get in touch. And as well, there's a storage offer. Now, I've done a few of these sorts of talks. My colleagues have done an awful lot of these sorts of talks. If one of you uses this code, I go into pole position. No one has ever done it, okay? So please, I'll even give you the £10, okay? Go online, order, use Tell, £10 off whatever you want to use. So please do feel free to use that. I've definitely spoken enough. So if anyone has any questions at all, I think we've got half an hour or so, and then do fire away, apart from Alistair, who's not allowed. You are really, by the way, Alistair.
Thanks for that. That was really enlightening. I had two really quick questions. So at the beginning you mentioned that you had a kind of a corporate job and you spent 3 evenings, weekday evenings and weekend days sitting together with your co-founder.
Yep.
And you talked about market trends. You talked about the article that you found about in America and Europe. There was the car hire. So I was just wondering, at that time, what were the kind of sources that you'd go to for market trends and the kind of articles that you'd read? That's the first question. The second question is slightly unrelated to that, but later on you mentioned about Oxfam and Mothercare and the kind of partnership that you have with them. I was just wondering, what's the kind of the value exchange in that? What's the nature of those partnerships?
Sure. Okay. First question. Again, things have changed considerably since when it was 2003. So it's quite 13 years ago. We're talking about, I guess, Harvard Business Reviews. At the time, we did a lot of reading of that, and this isn't online, okay? This is, I've still got some of these things. I've got reams of paper of stuff that we read through. So it was more around things like that. It was actually, I think, Inc. magazine, where we read about Zipcar and others in Europe at the time. So it was very much paper, not online at all at the time. And Andy had a bigger photocopier and a bigger printer than me, so he tended to just bring them all over to my house and we would just go through reams and reams of paper. Mothercare, Oxfam. So Mothercare, we are their deferred delivery partner. So if you are expecting a child and you want to buy all your stuff early, but you don't necessarily have the room or you don't want it delivered straight away, you go and buy it 6 months out. We'll store it for you as much as you want for one price, and then we'll deliver it much closer to the time. It's something that they do deferred payments, and they wanted to do deferred delivery. It's one of those situations where you go and speak to someone. Never go in with a sort of exactly knowing what you want to achieve. Let them come to you and let them tell you what you need. So we went in there thinking, do a bit of co-marketing, try and get them to send something out about Lovespace because new parents are a great market for us. But thankfully went in and let them tell us what their problem was. And suddenly this was born out of it. We did not go in looking for that. Oxfam works in a different way, in that for every 3 boxes that someone stores with us, they can get a free Oxfam box. So we will give them another box, we'll pick that up free of charge, and then we deliver those boxes to Oxfam. So, in terms of what's in it for us, much more in it, obviously, for Oxfam than us. But for us, it's fantastic to have a brand like Oxfam. It's also, in terms of CSR, being able to have something that's actually a real integral part of the business is a great thing for us. There's a lot of people with CSR, businesses with CSR policies that don't really fit in with what they do and what they look to achieve. But for us to have something so central to our service is something that we're really proud of.
Great presentation, thank you. Very insightful. Colin Spiller, Angel's Den. Loved your tip, raise money when you don't need it. Same as going to the bank. Never go to the bank when you need an overdraft. Absolutely not. Or when you need a credit card or a loan. So, lessons learned, fantastic. What about what you do differently now, having built 2 businesses? So when you're advising these investee companies that you're working with, what do you draw on as learnings? Thanks.
Very good question. I would like to say I haven't made any mistakes with Lovespace, but I've made plenty. So in terms of what I've learned, probably not a lot actually, and I certainly should be taking it more into account. I think it probably is around people actually. I think something that we didn't do badly with it, but we didn't get it quite right, was those people that join the business on day one, not day one, but those first people that come into the business. When they come in and you're in one room and every decision is made by someone shouting across the room to someone else, they feel that real sense of ownership and responsibility. When you then grow and you move into different rooms, you move into different floors, and by the end we had different buildings on 2 sides of the street, it's very, very important to bring those people with you, because they are the core of the business. And I think some we did. There's people at Zipcar now, where are we, 12 years on, who are still there. And they're some of our first ever employees at Streetcar. So some people we brought with us, and some people I don't think we did a good enough job with. So making sure that you really harness those people and give them that sense of ownership, that sense of responsibility as they grow with the business, is something I would definitely work harder at than we just didn't think about it enough, I think, in those early days. Yeah.
I think just building up on this people, and you mentioned a lot about how you wanted to bring people that is as good as yourself or even better. How do you do when you're in such an early stage for you to actually compensate these people? Do you give them equity? How do you decide how much equity to give to each kind of function people do?
Very good question, and very different answer today than 11 years ago. So 11 years ago, people wanted to join an early stage business because they wanted to learn how to run a business, they wanted to join a startup, and they were willing to take much lower salary with a few options. So those first people that we brought in, I think they joined on £30,000, albeit this is some time ago, but a lot of those guys came from graduate schemes. They'd been on for 4 or 5 years, were on £35,000, £40,000, and were taking that pay cut to join us, albeit with a little bit of equity. Now, we weren't going for people with 25 years experience in car sharing, because car sharing didn't exist. We were looking for bright entrepreneurial people who would be able to grow as the business grew, and they're the sort of people we took on. Nowadays it's different. People want everything. So people come and join I'm astounded by what startups pay people now. People want to come on board and they want market rate salary and they want big number of options. And there's a lot of businesses out there wanting these good people, so they tend to be able to get it. And it's a very different world to what it was 11 years ago, where we had management consultants join us who were on £70,000, join us on £35,000, no promise of options. If they did well, then we could bring in options later. But they just wanted that startup experience. I don't hear that nowadays at all. So it's making sure that you pay what you can afford, but you want to see people take a bit of a risk as well. It does annoy me slightly. I'm not talking about Lovespace, I'm talking about other businesses where people come in and they talk about the risk they're taking by joining you and getting market salary and getting options in your business. And they're 24, 25 years old. What have they got to lose? They've got 6 months if it doesn't work out of their lives to lose. That's it. So I always quite want to see someone joining, a bit of them, whether they take a bit of a hit on salary, whether they take it in options, whatever it is, actually taking a little bit of risk to join because they believe in the business, they love the business, and they love the entrepreneurial world. I still quite like seeing that, but it's less and less of it nowadays.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask, how did you get people and customers at the beginning trust your two new concepts that you implement?
To trust a new concept. So I think, it's about raising awareness of what it is that you're doing as much as anything else. So Streetcar was great actually because we actually met everyone. Now it was obviously never going to be scalable. When we had 100 people joining a day, for us to meet everyone was not going to happen in 4 or 5 years' time. But in those early days, being able to meet them, being able to take them through how it worked, it helped us massively. It really did. And I still think our best sales team at Streetcar were our first 100 odd members. Okay, because they really felt part of it. They were meeting these two idiots, didn't have a clue about anything, that were just going out and trying something new, and they felt responsibility. And we had so many stories of those first 100, 200 members where someone would finish their journey, drop the car back, and then they would be chatting for a quarter of an hour to the next person, talking about the service and stuff, and they'd be losing a quarter of an hour of their booking time because that's what they did. So they were our best sales tool. They really were, and I think it was because we met them, and they really felt that sense of ownership. They looked after the cars brilliantly. They would wash the cars. They felt responsibility to us. I had remember our first. So we launched in April, and we were 24/7 at the time in terms of being on the phones. And I got a call from one of our members on Boxing Day. He said, "Brett, I'm really sorry to disturb you on Boxing Day, but I just can't get into the car. I can't get my card to work." So I went into the system. I said, "Right, it was quite cool even then to be able to unlock it from my home." So I unlocked the car for him, and I said, "Right, you're in now." And I looked at his booking, and it started on Christmas Day. And I said, "How did you get in yesterday?" And he said, "I didn't." I said, "Oh, what? So you didn't use the car yesterday?" He said, "No, I couldn't get into the car, but everyone needs a break, Brett, and it was Christmas Day, and I didn't want to call you on Christmas Day." And it's those sorts of things. You're saying, "My God, these guys, they were part of the business." And it was things like that that really helped. And with Lovespace, again, we talk to every customer as much as we can to learn from them. It builds that rapport with them, but also, as I was saying earlier on, the partnerships in terms of the trust aspect is really important.
Yes, hello, thank you very much
Hi.
for the presentation. I'd like to know more your views on the sharing economy. You now have companies like Drivey or Get Around where you use personal cars. I imagine that you could do exactly the same with the Lovespace for empty spaces for people, maybe. So what are your views right now, and do you think it's also a question of timing? You couldn't do 10 years ago something like Drivey or Get Around, or is it just a different business? Thank you.
The sharing economy is only growing. I think peer-to-peer car sharing has been around, you'll be able to tell me better than I know, but Whip Car came around 2007, 2008. So it existed a while ago. I think people are getting more and more into the idea of sharing. When we launched Streetcar, that was a totally weird new thing. What? I don't own a car. I've got to own a car. And people then suddenly got the idea that actually car ownership might be more of a luxury than a necessity. So people's views change, and I think things like peer-to-peer car sharing is Alistair will know better than me as head of Car Plus, is growing all the time, and it will continue to grow. But it needs to make sense. So I think the sharing economy is growing, and there's things like Love Home Swap and things like that will continue to grow, and they're great ideas. For something like Lovespace, and they do exist, so there is peer-to-peer storage, it can work, but it tends to, the way that it works at the moment is your next door neighbor, for instance, you want to store with your next door neighbor because he has extra space, and therefore you go online and say, I'll store with him and I'll store in his loft. My view, it might work, and it probably does work to a certain degree, but if you have your own space issues here, your next door neighbor is highly likely to have those same space issues. So I'm sure there's nuances to make it work, but I think the sharing economy is definitely growing, but it won't necessarily suit absolutely every industry. Yeah, did you have a question?
Well, I was wondering, you come across as a very humble chap.
I'm not.
I'd like to know whether you were born with that, or you developed that, and how you've become such a sort of very approachable person.
Oof.
So I think that's a very good trait in business.
Thank you. Thank you, firstly. Yeah, I think I was probably born with it. It's not something I am. People that knew me at 12 say I'm the same now in many ways, unfortunately. Mental age, etc. My parents still think of me as being 10 years old, and I still get told off by them, so that probably keeps me firmly on the ground. I think the one thing I would say, sort of slightly related to this, is we learned very early on in the days of Streetcar never to celebrate success too much. So if something good happened and we high-fived each other, guaranteed the next day something absolutely disastrous happened. So we didn't celebrate success too much. People say, when did you know Streetcar was going to be a success? I genuinely didn't, and I wouldn't have called it a success a day before we signed the deal with Zipcar. Until we sold the business and we'd achieved that, to my mind, things could still go wrong, things still did go wrong. So, we never celebrated success too much, but in terms of me as a person, yeah, it's my parents' fault, probably. Yeah.
Do you view Lovespace as a real estate business or a service business?
Very good question. Service, very much so. So I think, as you're probably alluding to, I think self-storage companies are very much a real estate business. For us, it's service. It's a tech business, and tech enables us to provide the service that we do. But yeah, no, I see us very, very much as a service. It doesn't really matter where we store our stuff. We're pretty flexible in terms of actually where we store it. So we do have our own big warehouse. We have big peaks in the summer with students, so we have to flex our warehousing considerably over that period of time, and we do that. So very much more a service business than real estate.
And surely the business model is still related to the real estate. I don't know how big your boxes are. Is that meters squared, half a metre squared?
Yeah, half a metre squared-ish.
You stack from about 7 high, something like that.
We've got, racking, so yeah, 2 high on each rack.
Per square foot, your rental yield is through the roof.
Rental, sorry, what we're paying. Oh.
The margin's very high.
Margin, the majority of our costs are on the logistics side, certainly. That said, because we have to flex our storage so much, our storage costs are probably higher than obviously they would be per square foot if we had, massive warehouse in the middle of nowhere. So margin in terms of the storage side is high, but when you take into account that we pick up your stuff free of charge and we deliver it back at cost, margins, I wish margins were higher. Yes.
Right, in Lovespace, you have a combination of angel funding, VC funding, and crowdfunding. So what made you decide to go for crowdfunding? Because for you guys, with the VC funding, you could have done everything with the VC round itself.
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, probably the main thing was raising awareness of what it was that we were doing, actually. So with crowdfunding, you get out there. We have 250 new shareholders through that crowdfunding round, and we have 250 people talking about us, shouting about us to their friends. For a small business with awareness levels in this room were very, very low, probably actually higher than I thought they would be, but still very, very low. And this is London is where we are. So we've got a massive job to do to try and raise that awareness. And as much as we can get other people talking about us, the better. So that was the principal reason why we went with crowdfunding. The other reason was that we were looking for quite a difficult number. We were looking to raise sort of in between of quite a large angel round and a very small VC round. Again, crowdfunding sort of fits quite nicely in there. And also I think in terms of VC rounds in particular, due diligence is obviously very limited, and therefore time for management team is less, I think, on crowdfunding than it is with some of the other ways to raise finance. So that was in the back of our mind, but the main reason why we did it was for raising awareness of what it was that we were doing. Yeah.
On the valuation that you received from the sale of Streetcar, how was that value arrived at on multiple of what in relation to the different valuations over the time period that you had it? That's the first bit of the question. The second bit of the question is, if you did well out of that, would you, why wouldn't you, in effect, maybe self-finance Lovespace? What would be pros and cons of taking other people's money versus then going for it?
Yeah. Okay, good question. I should say, I'm not sure if it's on this sheet of paper, but whatever it says that we sold Streetcar for, that's not the figure. I wish it was. That's not the figure, if it is on there. So difficult to say. I don't know what we sold the business for, and that's a genuine answer because it was a share deal. So Zipcar were looking to float their business the following year, or actually that same year. And therefore it was a share deal. So it was done as a multiple of revenue, and we both had that same multiple. So we didn't really know actually what the value was at that time. It didn't go quite according to plan in that we got referred to the Competition Commission. So Zipcar's IPO in the States, which was due 3 months after our deal, was put back a year because of what we were going through with the Competition Commission over here. So it's hard to say actually sort of how that was valued, but if it was anything, it was a revenue multiple, but it didn't really matter what that was because it was all shares. In terms of self-financing, I've put in more into Streetcar than into Lovespace than I put into anything else money-wise. So, I'm not going to complain at all with what we got from the sale of Streetcar, albeit it was actually very much dependent on how Zipcar did in the market a year and 2 years down the line, in terms of actually what my net worth was. So, from my position, I've sort of done my back of the fag packet calculations on what I'm comfortable putting into startup life, what I'm comfortable putting into other investments, because at the end of the day, Streetcar and what we made out of Streetcar was pure, from my perspective, wasn't so I could go and buy a yacht or anything. It was purely to try and give myself the opportunity to raise a family and give them a start in life that I was fortunate enough to have when I was a kid. That was the reason behind Streetcar in the first place, or wanting to do my own thing in the first place. So I put in more into Lovespace than anything else. I do invest in other businesses, as I pointed out earlier on, but they're not, in the big scheme of things, they're not big investments at all. They're big for me, but they're not big in the grand scheme of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I read somewhere that you said you had this eureka moment.
Can you just speak up, please? We can't hear over here.
Sure.
Here's a mic.
Thank you. I read somewhere. Is that working? No, turn on. So I was saying, I read somewhere that you came up with this eureka moment in the middle of the night when you came up with the brand Lovespace. And with the internet being such a major driver of business to both your brands, how important is it that when you come up with a brand that the domains are available? For example, like Lovespace, all the .com and .co.uk. What if you came up with a great brand and none of the domains were available today?
Good question. Eureka moment. Is that what I said? My God, that's not humble in the slightest. And I think there's a lot of people that will say the name's dreadful as well. I think if I say that I launched this business called Lovespace, people are pretty excited to start with because they think it's either a dating website or some sort of soft pornography or something like that. And when I say it's about cardboard boxes and storage, I'm like, what? I mean, so it was a eureka moment. It was a moment, and it was at 2 or 3 in the morning as my child was screaming next door. My young baby was screaming next door. So that was true. Now, Lovespace. So Streetcar domain didn't exist. So when we launched Streetcar, we launched with mystreetcar.co.uk. We felt that what we were trying to achieve, we were trying to create that sense of ownership with our members, that they owned the cars, that they owned part of Streetcar. So we felt that we could get away with mystreetcar.co.uk. By the end, we managed to get streetcar.co.uk and we managed to get streetcar.com after a number of years, but we didn't launch with that domain name. Lovespace, my Lovespace would probably sound even worse than Lovespace, so that wasn't an option. Lovespace, to be honest with you, I got quite lucky with Lovespace in that somebody had the domain, but they weren't using it. And I spoke to him and I said, look, we're thinking of starting this business. We haven't come up with the brand name yet. We're thinking of using this brand name. Would you potentially sell it? And he said, I'm not using it. My wife's running a marathon next week. If you give her £100, you can have the domain name. And I think we gave £300, £400 and got the domain.
Could I just ask, would you launch and then try and pick up the domain later, or is the domain crucial?
Well, we did that with Streetcar.
Was it expensive, or?
We got, again, this is on camera. Damn. So there was a South African business that had streetcar.co.uk and streetcar.com, and they were a gifting business. And we spoke to them about buying streetcar.co.uk. They weren't using it, but they had the domain. I think they said it was going to cost us £10,000. £10,000 was more than we had in the business at that stage, but they actually just let it run out. So we got .co.uk just after it had run out, and we actually bought .com from them later on down the line. So I think, in answer to your question, the domain has to be relevant. If we hadn't have got My Streetcar and we hadn't got comfortable with the fact that we can make that work as a brand in its own right. So everyone's card had My Streetcar with a D on the end that we thought was very clever because it was My Street Card, and we were patting ourselves on the back with how brilliant we were at that one. So we were comfortable that was good enough. Lovespace, would I have launched it? We had another couple of options, so the domain name was probably more important there. But I think if you can get a domain name that's close to it and get it later on, then so be it. But you certainly don't want to have something totally different to what the brand name is. Yeah.
You mentioned about taxation, VAT, sorry, and you were able to claim it quite quickly. That actually helped your cash flow. Is that the same situation now with VAT, where you get it up front, as you explained earlier on?
No, that was purely the deal that we had on the cars, and it was purely because of that hire purchase agreement. So, do Zipcar do it now? Possibly, I don't know.
My second question is in relation to recruitment. It's very, very challenging to go through the process of HR and everything else. Then you had your own say in terms of, vetting the individual. What's the criteria you tend to use to vet or find the suitability? It's very, very difficult from my personal experience of trying to source people sometimes.
Sorry, so the question is, how did we do it, or?
What sort of model did you use in terms of assessing if this person might fit into your team or the structure of what you're engaging in?
To be honest with you, with both businesses, but I guess sort of focusing on Streetcar, we would bring people in for attitude and potential more than anything else, because we were a new concept. So there was no one out there with huge amounts of experience. So we would hire on attitude and the feeling that they were going to give 100% to this business. You know, we hired the sort of people that weren't going to look at their watch. They were going to come in early in the morning. They were going to leave late at night. They were never going to, clock watch or anything like that. We hired those people, and we hired people that we thought were incredibly bright, intelligent, and be able to grow with the business. In all honesty, two hiring mistakes we made. I'm not going to come up with any sort of names, but the two issues that we had with hiring, and then when we made mistakes, was one is when we were desperate for someone, so we had somebody leave and we had to fill that position quickly. That's when you make mistakes. That's when you sometimes settle for somebody. You know they're not 100% right, but there's a gap in the business, you need to get them in. Big mistake. And secondly, the second issue that we had was when we tried to hire for experience. So we tried to hire people from car leasing background or car rental background, and that's not what we were. We were everything that wasn't. And so we tried to hire these people with experience, but they couldn't move with the business. So we hired these people who, quite often graduates with no experience at all. We knew that we would have take them an extra 3 months maybe to get their feet on the table and get up to speed, but after that they would far out deliver anyone with supposed experience.
How often did you say no? If you got 10 applicants, what was the ratio?
Probably more people at the end than the beginning, that's for sure. I think we probably had 5 applicants at the beginning and we took 4. I mean, we came up with an entrepreneur development program, which was our sort of graduate scheme, and I think we did our first one after 3 years maybe, and we had, I don't know what we had, but sort of say 50 people applying for 5 roles, and by the end we had 2,500-3,000. So it was, but I wasn't dealing with the recruitment process. So I did do the final interview, but yeah, we certainly turned down a lot more people towards the end than we did at the beginning. That's for sure. Yeah.
What did the very early stage rollout promotion like for Streetcar and Lovespace? I think you mentioned you did like flyers and door knocking for Streetcar.
Yeah.
Did you do that with one neighbourhood at a time? Did you start with the whole of London? What things worked and what things didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, Streetcar was a very localised business, because when we launched, we had 8 cars, but they needed to be in a sort of dense cluster, because especially in what we were talking about earlier on about trust and stuff, if people went to book the car for the first time and it was unavailable, and the next nearest one was 5 miles away, you've lost them. They would never use the service again. They would try it once and that would be it. So our marketing was very much, so our first few cars were in Clapham, around that area. So our first lot of marketing was very much focused towards that. Again, later on we made a big mistake, got our funding in from a VC, suddenly had some money to spend on marketing, and did this great big tube campaign, which, I don't know what we spent, £20,000, which was a lot of money at the time. But this great big tube campaign that was across London. We were bigger than Clapham at that time, but we were not all across London. So we had so much wastage for something like that. And again, went back to being very, very much more local and cost effective and targeted. Lovespace is slightly different in that we can be national from day one. So we will do a lot of the logistics side in London. We'll do ourselves with our own fleet and our own drivers, but we have a third-party courier partner who will be able to do the service in Edinburgh or wherever it may be. That said, we focus most of the marketing on London. It's a slightly different animal in that we've got many more different segments to go after, and there's different ways to try and get to those segments. So students is one, where one marketing channel or 2 marketing channels might work. Small businesses is another, new parents is another, people going travelling is another. So there's quite a few different potential sort of customer segments that we didn't really have. Streetcar was very much residential use or business use, and that was sort of it.
Just a quick follow-up question then. So with Lovespace, to roll out, as you said, like the whole thing at once, didn't you have to secure storage facility space beforehand, or are you doing that on demand? I don't exactly know.
No, so because we've got the courier partner that deals with Edinburgh or whatever, so we can provide. So we say to people, you go online, you book your pickup, we'll get to you in 24 hours and pick it up from you, and it doesn't matter where you are. So our courier partner will do that within 24 hours. So we can provide that same service regardless of where you live to where we store. So we can store in deepest, darkest Cornwall and still provide the same service to you up in Edinburgh. So we could provide that level of service anyway. If we couldn't, if we were relying on our own fleet and only our own fleet, we'd have obviously very much focused just in London or a small area of London.
Logistics could actually be a long distance, potentially.
Yeah, and it is because of our ability to use a partner. So that's what we say is the service we provide. In London, we can provide a better service than that, actually. But the one that we talk about is what our sort of MVP, I guess, was when we launched.
Can we have like last two questions because of time?
Just out of curiosity, I didn't really catch your background for yourself, Streetcar, but in terms of technology, how'd you figure that out? E-cards and all that. Quite impressive.
Somebody else had done it, thankfully. So we spoke very early on about building our own tech. And again, I would be here now still having not built it if we had done that. So there was a company in Germany that provided the car sharing technology for a company in North America. So they'd already done it for, not Zipcar actually, another one that Zipcar had bought later on. But they'd already done it with several hundred cars. So the technology existed. It wasn't exactly what we wanted it to look like, in 5 years' time, but it worked and it was great for those first few years. When we started getting a bit of money and we built our own tech team, then we always kept the hardware, but we started building the software side from scratch, so that was very much more tailored to us. So when we could, we did that. But if we'd done that from the beginning, we would never have launched it.
Maybe one last question.
So just going back to when you came up with the idea and then you went and worked for Mars and then followed it on, do you think that timing made a difference as to how successful or how Streetcar went about specifically? And do you think if you would have started off right after college, would things have been different? That's one part of the question. And the second is, did Andy follow on into Lovespace?
Good question. No, he ran away. So first part of the question, if I'd done it straight from uni, it wouldn't have worked for two reasons. One is I don't think the market was where it needed to be. I don't think people would have got it in the UK at that time, in sort of 97, 98. The other thing was I knew nothing when I launched Streetcar, but I knew even less when I just left university. So for me, there's a lot of people that will launch businesses straight from uni now. There's a lot of people that launch businesses at uni or before uni. So it can be done, but for me, I needed to get some skills other than sitting in a lecture theatre and falling asleep and going out drinking in a pub. I needed to do a little bit more than that post uni. So I don't think it would have worked for that reason. That said, it was a very different place back then as well. People weren't starting businesses. So I went to Durham, and everyone that left went and joined a grad scheme of some sort, mostly accountancy or banking. Some people joined other businesses. Only one person in our year launched his own business when we left, and his name was Dr. Paul Hawkins, and he launched his own business. And everyone will have heard of this, right? Has everyone heard of Hawkeye? Yeah. So he is Dr. Paul Hawkins is Hawkeye. He's the only guy in our year that went and launched his business, and he did rather well for himself with Hawkeye. Andy went to live in South Africa as soon as he possibly could after we sold the business. So yeah, I'm just about to start talking to him. He pays very little tax, and he's having the time of his life. But he's doing similar things to me actually out there, and we're in touch the whole time. And I was best man at his wedding, he's best man at mine, and we're still great mates. But he went to South Africa afterwards. Okay, thank you.